Got another 1 minute response for you. This is the question. Residential construction projects in the district seem to be increasing under lot coverage. How do you propose developing a balance between the rights of property owners and the negative impacts on water runoff, tree canopy, block sunlight?
Excellent question. 30 seconds? Started at 60 seconds, right? Okay. Metro does have a ratio that should be followed in terms of how much of a building can follow a lot. And I think it's important to communicate with Metro codes if we suspect that properties are beyond those districts, and to get those people on the site to look at them. That's one issue. There is such an interest now in green construction and in reducing the amount of impervious paving, so that we can reduce the problem with stormwater runoff, green roofs, and also an issue, so that there are ways that we can have the impact of large buildings on our lots and be not quite as great. In historic districts, there are guidelines within the historic overlay that say that houses should be within the same scale as their surrounding neighbors. I know that Belmont Hillsborough has been working actively with the Historic Commission to ensure that they remember those guidelines and uphold those, and I will support them in their efforts to do that.
Thank you. David?
Living with an architect, this is something that I've had a lot of discussions about. The hard part is that even if we get them to stick to the maximum lot coverage, that's a lot. And so I think we have to look beyond what's been done in the past and engage particularly the Historic Commission, I often call it the Historical Commission, in order to get them to be more consistent in the way that they enforce the existing rules, to be more out front and getting out there to the lots early on, because most of the time I think the architects involved, the builders involved, would be willing to accommodate reasonable requests, but we just don't get to them early enough. So vigilance is the key thing, and as a council member, one of my goals will be to follow in Gene Cassell's footsteps in making sure that we monitor that information and get it out to everybody in a timely manner.
Okay, next question, David. This is submitted by the man you just referenced, District 18 resident Gene Cassell. Again, 1 minute response. Every candidate has certain ties, family, co-workers, friends, contributors, partners, that might influence his or her decisions as an office holder. What ties might influence your decisions, and what would you do about them, David?
Your band could just step out of the room. Wow, that's just such a complicated question. My partner's an architect, and I think one of the most creative in Nashville as far as developing spaces that really work well in historic communities. So I don't think that's a problem. I have some very vocal and passionate supporters who I love dearly and look to for advice on certain subjects, but not other subjects. Randy Rayburn is a great example of somebody who, when it comes to business or parking in the village, is somebody that absolutely I would turn to him for advice, but there might be other subjects I would look to someone else instead. I don't know where else to go with that.
All right, thank you. Ms. Allen.
My husband is a physician. I don't think there are that many healthcare issues that come up before the Metro Council at that level, but I would certainly use his expertise in how to deal with people on health-related issues. I'm a mechanical engineer, so I have certainly lots of expertise that I can draw upon in evaluating infrastructure problems and things like that in Metro, that big decisions have to be made about large capital projects where I could be informed by my fellow engineers and architects in terms of what is a reasonable course to move forward with. I think that it's always good to gather information. I think it's important to gather information from both sides of the issue, and that in that way you are not unduly influenced in an unfair way. I would simply seek expertise from both sides of an issue on anything that comes up along that way.
Okay. Two questions now about zoning matters. First, conservation zoning and residential single-family zoning have been used to preserve the architectural character of our neighborhoods and limit increased density. What are your views on these tools, and what are their strengths and weaknesses?
And how much time do you have?
I think still a minute, right?
All right. I think that conservation zoning has benefited both Hillsborough West End and the Belmont Hillsborough neighborhood, for both trolley car neighborhoods that were built around the 1920s. And there are many lovely, lovely homes that it has been our good fortune to be able to preserve with the conservation zoning overlay tool. I worked on the Hillsborough West End conservation zoning overlay project, and in our neighborhood, we worked hard to gauge the interest and had that overlay installed in the areas where it was appropriate and where there was clear interest. I also spearheaded our RS down zoning effort. At the time, there was a very strong move to demolish our small affordable housing and build very large mansions in its place. And we were losing the smaller houses that I want my children to come home and live in. So it was a good tool for us, we thought. We again gauged the interest of the neighborhood, and neighbors were very supportive of that effort. So we did a petition and got very overwhelming number of signatures and went to Metro Council. And that RS down zoning for us, because we already have a healthy number of duplexes, has allowed us to maintain what we consider to be a very healthy balance of multifamily and single-family homes.
David?
Conservation zoning and down zoning. Pluses and minuses. With conservation zoning, the great benefit has been that the nature or the character of our neighborhood has been preserved. I think a potential downside that we've seen, not so much in our neighborhood, but some parts of East Nashville and Richland, places like that, is sometimes the rules are so strict that it prevents good things from happening, or causes somebody to sit on a piece of property and let it fall apart rather than doing what the conservation overlay would require. And so we need to address that issue. Recently, on my street, Primrose and Primrose Circle, we put an overlay on the street that has a lot of flexibility. It focuses on character rather than a long list of you can only do this. It looks to adding porches, allows porches to be added to houses that don't have them, and things like that. So, character.
Okay, this is a follow-up to the prior question. Based on your views, how would you resolve the current conflict around the Ramsden School property, which centers around preserving the structure versus tearing it down and setting a precedent of removing properties from the conservation overlay?
My understanding is that the only way to remove it from the conservation overlay is if there is a demonstration that there is no longer an economically viable way to preserve the property. I know that most of the neighbors in that area felt very strongly that the piece of property should be redeveloped. I also been presented with the proposal to put in single-family homes that are very much in keeping with that area, and that the majority of the neighbors were very much in favor of. The condition of the property right now is deplorable. If you drive by, you can see the activity that goes on at night, during the day in some cases, and there are a lot of kids that live in the neighborhood plus the school there. So we need to do something, we need to move forward, and I hope the Historical Commission will see reason this time, following the guidance of the court, that found that there was no economic viability at this point, based on the evidence that had been presented.
Okay, Ms. Allen.
Conservation zoning is sometimes a complicated issue. That overlay was put in place in part to save the houses on Gillespie Avenue just a block over. And if you look now at the Elmington Apartments in Gillespie, you can see 4 lovely homes that have been preserved and a gorgeous gateway to our neighborhood. It's been a good thing. The Ransom property, unfortunately, has not moved as smoothly. The owners asked for an economic hardship, which is the way that it could be demolished. I think removing it from the overlay, everyone in Nashville agrees, is a very bad idea. It would set a very bad precedent for historic overlays all over the city. This property is going back before the Historic Commission. I've spoken with the Historic Commission and with the property owner, and I believe that there's a possibility for compromise. Part of the building is not in very good shape, part of it is in good shape and could be used as part of a complex that includes single-family homes that I believe would be to the liking of the neighbors in the area. And I'm working to make sure that that is a solution that we include as a possibility.
Okay, Ms. Allen, for this next question, you have 90 seconds to respond. Metro's planning department advocates increased urban density in Nashville. What are the pros and cons of pursuing such a policy, and do you see any impact on the residents of District 18?
Planning is very enthusiastic about increased density. It leads to much more effective mass transit. It makes greater use of our infrastructure where it's already big enough to hold that. And there are advantages to having more people close to the corridors so that we can make our mass transit work better and make better use of our infrastructure. I think that people move into our neighborhood because they love the character of the neighborhood. So I believe that there's a delicate balance that we've worked hard to maintain over the years. I see that in many of our areas along the corridors, we have a buffer zone of multifamily housing. 12 South is a great example of that. The really cool condos that are built on Paris Avenue, they lead up to terrific retail on 12 South. It's an exciting, hip place to live, and it attracts young single people who are thrilled to be in easy walking distance of that and a bus line to get downtown. I also know many people who move into this neighborhood because they value a small house with a yard, and that there's a value to hanging on to that as well. So I think that what I've been calling smart growth consistent with the character of the neighborhood that allows our businesses and small universities to thrive means that we work towards increasing density where it's appropriate, and we work to preserve our houses and yards in the areas that are farther away from the buffers that aren't as able to take care of mass transit. I think that's a good balance, and that's what I intend to work for.
Okay, Mr. Glasgow.
Well, this is a difficult one because we agree so roundly. Density is a positive thing because it does bring us a lot of benefits of a bigger city. The challenge is balancing it with the character of our neighborhood the entire time. I think 12th and Paris is an ideal example of some of the things that they're now proposing to build along 12th. I think could equally go in other parts of our city and be contributing. They add density, they add character in themselves. And the major thing, though, is as we add density, we need to address things like the mass transit. If we're inviting more people to live there, we need to find ways to make it easier for them to walk to the things that they want to walk to or that they want to get to. And we need to make sure that the mass transit that we do have is reliable, on time, and that you don't have to sit on a bench in mud to wait for the bus. One of the great things that I think we're doing right now is that it was supposed to happen last year, but the flood wiped out the equipment. They're in the process of rebuilding it. Shortly, you'll be able to use your smartphone to find out when the next bus will be at a nearby bus stop. I think things like that are the creative sorts of answers that are going to make greater density possible on the edges of our neighborhoods.
Okay, Dave.